Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. S.P. Sood, retired Associate Professor, Department of Library and Information Science, University of Rajasthan, Jaipur. Today we will study Modules 2, History of Catalogue Codes. It is a part of Knowledge Organizational Structure, Cataloging. Let me introduce with the module. A catalog must function properly and grow with the collection of a library. The entries, description, arrangement, and style must be uniform. Till about the middle of 19th century, the catalogs of libraries were based on a set of rules drafted by an individual cataloger in a casual way on the basis of long tradition and practice prevailing in the library. Hence, there was no uniformity in the catalogs of different libraries. The following are the objectives of this module. First objective is to discuss the situation of library catalogs before the creation of catalog codes, to define catalog code, to discuss the history of and development of important catalog codes of the world. Let me define the catalog code. The catalog code means a set of rules with defined terminology designed for cataloging purposes, and rules means single provision to carry out cataloging work. The catalog codes and rules guide the cataloger as to how the entries for books are to be prepared so that one and the same system and pattern might exist for ever whosoever has done it. Cataloging should not depend on the flair and fade of an individual. Now, let me quote the definition of Dr. S.R. Ranganathan. Library catalog is an ancient library tool, but catalog code of a rigorous kind is of recent origin. It first attained rigor in state local codes, that is, in individual libraries. Now it is attaining rigor in national codes, and international code is yet to be established. Development of catalog codes. After the beginning of the 17th century, Thomas Bodley evolved a catalog code for the Oxford University Library. He included, along other regulations, classified arrangement with an alphabetical author index arranged by surname. He advocated the entry of noblemen under their family names. However, the idea of an entry under the surname was first developed by a British bookseller, Andrew Mounsell, in 1595. In 1697, Frederick Rostgard published in Paris his discourse on a new method for setting up a library catalogue. Its second edition was published in 1698. He provided for a subject arrangement subdivided at once chronologically and by size of the volume. Directions are given for an alphabetical index of subject and authors at the end of the catalogs. Authors are to be entered by surname. Works bound together are to have separate entries. Authors' names are to be supplied for anonymous works when known. First time in France, the use of card was made for catalogue in 1775 by Rosier for preparing the catalogue of Paris Academy of Science. In 1791, in France, first time a national code was evolved and instructions were issued to follow it. Libraries were also asked to use the card catalog. Title page was to be transcribed on the card and the author's surname underlined for the filing word if there was no author. The keyword in the title was to be underlined. A collection was added which was to be included the number of volumes, size, a statement of illustrations, the material of which the book was made, the kind or type and missing pages, and a description of the binding if it was outstanding in any way. The important modern catalog codes are described as follows. First, systematic catalog code is known as British Museum Code, which was brought out in 1841. And the title of the catalog code was Rules for Compiling the Catalogues of Printed Books, Maps, and Music in British Museum. It was published by London British Museum. Revised edition came out in 1936, which was further reprinted in 1948 and 1951. The earliest code of cataloging, which was exerted considerable influence over the subsequent codes in Peniz's 91 rules printed as prefatory matter in the British Museum Catalogue of 1841. Sir Anthony Penizzi, who was born in 1797 and died in 1879, he, with his two associates, J. Winter Jones and Edward Edwards, formulated the first version of famous 91 rules in 1837, was accepted in 1839 and was published in 1841. These rules are for the entry of authors only. The importance of this code lies not only in the fact of its continuing application to the catalogue of a great national library, but also in its primacy. That is, it was the funding code being the first systematic code of rules. It laid down the foundation for further codes which covered rules for author and title entries. British Museum Code 1841. The trustees of the British Museum finally approved the adoption of Peniz's Code of Rules for Cataloging, and even today it forms the basis on which the British Museum Catalogue is being compiled. Till 1887, the original 91 rules were faithfully adopted in the cataloguing process of British Museum. The latest 1936 edition contains only 41 rules. It means total 91 rules were reduced to 46 rules. The objective implicit in British Museum rules for entry are two. The first objective is to enable the user of the catalogue to determine really whether or not the library has the book he wants. The catalogue is constantly searched by many readers and members of the staff of the library, and the quicker this information can be found, the better is the catalog. The second objective is to reveal to the user of the catalog under one form of the author's name what works the library has by a given author and what editions or translation of a given work. Asdale says Penige's rules were the first thorough code ever drawn up. The second catalog code is known as Charles C. Debit Code, which was brought out in 1852. At about 1850, the American libraries seriously considered the need to bring out a code of cataloging rules. Debit, who was the librarian of Smithsonian Institute, prepared a code of 39 rules in 1852. These rules were modeled after Penige's rules and issued under the title Smithsonian Report on the Construction of Catalogues of Libraries and Their Publications by means of separate stereotyped titles with rules and examples. These rules were again limited to the author entries but included a model subject index. Pitte has appreciated and he has said names Debit, not Cutter, as father of modern library methods. The third catalog code, compiled by and known as Cutter's Rules, it was published in 1876. 1876 is an epoch-making year in the history of cataloging, for in this year was published Charles Amy Cutter's Rules for a Dictionary Catalog. In abbreviated form, this code is known as RDC and it contained 205 rules. The latest, fourth edition, was published in 1904 from Washington. The edition contains 369 rules. For the dictionary catalog, it is still the standard code of the rules, and there is every reason to suppose that it will remain so. Henry A. Sharp has evaluated this code as the first code of complete cataloging practice for every kind of entry in a dictionary catalog. Cutter's code of rules not only provides rules for subject entry and the arrangement of entries, but also indicates methods that may be adopted for brief, moderately full, and very full cataloging. So this is the first catalog code which has prescribed 3 levels of cataloging. As such, it is suited to the needs of all types of libraries. Dorothy M. Norris remarked that Cutter's rules are a sound exposition of the fundamentals of cataloging and should be studied by all would-be catalogers. Cutter strengthened the concept that catalogs not only should point the ways to an individual publication but should also assemble and organize literary units. Dr. S. R. Ranganathan has remarked him as genius and his work RDC as classics and immortal. Other features of the code include rules for corporate authorship, more developed and numerous than British Museum, with valuable discussion on the difficulties, entry under name of institution, but government organizations under place name, division of corporate authorship in 4 types, double entry recommended quite often when no alternative is completely acceptable, A list of objectives is given at the beginning of the code, followed by a comprehensive list of definitions, rules for cataloging special materials, that is, manuscripts, maps, etc., by other compilers are included at the end of the work. The next catalog code, fourth catalog code, is known as the Persian Instructions. In short, we call it as PIN code, which was brought out in 1899. The Persian Instructions rules for the alphabetical catalogs of the Persian libraries, translated from the second edition by Andrew Osborne, 1938. This catalog code is a significant contribution to cataloging rules after Qatar is found in Persian Instructions. PIN may be taken to be the second important code of a non-local nature. It was designed originally for compiling a union catalog of the then German state libraries. Although not very influential in English-speaking countries, PIN did influence cataloging in Holland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Hungary, Switzerland, etc. The basic PIN, like British Museum Code, has fairly short entries and few added references are used for alternative approaches to some documents. In addition, PIN is one of the few codes to include specific instructions for various degrees of limited cataloging. Filing instructions are also included. In continuation of the PIN code, the most outstanding feature is that it does not recognize the concept of corporate authorship. They are treated either as of personal authorship or anonymous works. Dr. Osborne makes three criticisms of PIN in the introduction of his translation. First criticism was rules are too complicated. Second criticism was too few references are allowed. And the third criticism is too many titles do not lend themselves readily to the prescribed formulas. The next catalog code is Dyska Code of 1886. In 1886, Professor K. Dyska, a German librarian, published his code, which was translated into English by an American librarian, K. A. Linderfelt, and it was published in 1890. Special features of this code are as follows. First, it does not accept the principle of corporate authorship, entry being made under title, and second, the grammatical arrangement of title entries is preferred as compared to Anglo-American practice of natural word order. Andrew Osborne has praised this code due to three reasons. First, it is not a theoretical utterance but consists of carefully thought out rules based on practical experience. Second, wording throughout is clear and all terms have been defined. And third one, the grasp of essential displayed by its framers is truly noteworthy. The next catalog code now I am going to discuss is Anglo-American Code 1908. The title of this catalog code is Cataloging Rules, Author and Title Entries, compiled by the committees of the Library Association and the ALA, and published as American edition and British edition. The American Library Association 1876 and Library Association 1877 issued independent set of rules in 1878 and 1883 respectively, but decided to issue a combined code to secure greater uniformity in cataloging between English-speaking areas. It was issued in 1908. L.S. Just and Henry Guppy, the two eminent British librarians, and Melville Davy, representing the American libraries, played a significant role in producing this joint code. The 174 rules related to the entry, heading, and descriptive cataloging of the works for an author and title catalogs, guided chiefly by the requirements of large libraries of a scholarly nature. The preface acknowledges and the notes throughout the text indicate the influence of Qatar, Penn, British Museum Code, and LC rules. A code gives more importance to corporate author and commits first time the blunder of the distinguishing between institution from society. Its importance lies in the fact of its being the first international catalog code, in the extent of its rapid and widespread adoption and use by all kinds and all sizes of libraries in the two countries since its introduction, and in its continued use in Britain. Its definitions are more acceptable than that of RDC. A code was criticized as being too elaborate for application to small libraries and for its omission to provide rules for subject entries. There are no rules for alphabetization. The rules for maps and atlases are inadequate. No rules have been provided in the section on government publications for reports by committees, royal commission, etc., or for government institutions such as Science Museum. Again, there is no rule for change of name of corporate authors. The examples are one of the weakest elements of the code. Many examples are in German or in Latin. By the 1920s, A code was under criticism and the need for revision was repeatedly expressed. Some called for simplification, saying the rules were too fuzzy. Others wanted more details. Those who wanted details won. In 1930s, Committee of ALA and LA began to revision. The LA dropped out at the outbreak of the war. The ALA continued alone, producing a draft code in 1941. The final version appeared in 1949, covering author and title headings, the rules for description being separately published by Library of Congress as rules for descriptive cataloging. The next catalog code is Vatican Code, which was published in 1931, and the title of this catalog code was Vatican Library Rules for Catalog of Printed Books. It was published in Italian in 1931. Second edition came out in 1939. Translated from the second Italian edition, edited by Willis C. Wright, and it was published by Chicago ALA 1948. The Papal Collection. Papal collection is the related to Pope or Catholic Church at the Vatican, among the richest in Europe, had a catalogue which was more of an inventory type. In 1927, the Vatican Library was offered aid by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace to compile a new catalogue for its collection, and a team of American librarians consisting J.C.M. Henson and W.W. Bishop compiled a catalogue. As the dictionary form of catalogue was decided upon, Cutter's rules provided a basis for this was the only code to contain rules on the choice of subject heading for dictionary catalogue. The existing Italian rules for the compilation of the alphabetical catalogue 1911 and the ALA rules were taken in evolving the Vatican rules. It is one of the few modern codes to cover the whole field of cataloging, author entry, the description of the book, subject entry, and filing. There are several useful appendices, including some excellent sample cards, rules for cataloging 15th and 16th century books, and a glossary of library terms in Italian, English, French, German, and Spanish languages. The code is still used in Vatican Library. The next catalog code is known as ALA Rules, which was published in 1949. The title of this catalog code is ALA Cataloging Rules for Author and Title Entries. It was published by Chicago ALA 1949. Rules for Descriptive Cataloging in the Library of Congress, a companion part of this code, was brought out by Washington Government Printing Office in 1949. Between 1936 and 1939, both Library Association, LA and ALA, cooperated in preparation for a new joint code, as A code was not fulfilling the requirements. But due to outbreak of war, British participation was discontinued. The ALA proceeded independently and produced their preliminary second edition of the code in 1941 in two parts, Part 1, Entry and Headings, and Part 2, Description of Books, in which 174 rules of the A code had grown to 375 rules. The 1941 version was widely criticized by A.D. Osborne in his article The Crisis in Cataloging, charging it too legalistic. The reason for making the rules were ignored at the expense of detail, and principles were obscured completely. Many librarians also started thinking in the direction. In spite of this, second edition came out in 1949. Descriptive part was dropped and it was issued by the Library of Congress in 1949. This carries all the mistakes that are already criticized. It is also too elaborate and also not suitable for small libraries. J.S. Shera has criticized this code, saying that the 40 some pages in 1908 has blossomed into over 200 in 1949, an increase in bulk of some 500%, while the 15 or more pages of descriptive cataloging in 1908 were now 100. To the cry of greater simplification, he proclaimed the answer of profession has been expand the code from a total of 88 pages in 1908 in a total of 406 pages in 1949. The gist of the outstanding criticism of Samuel Lubezki would be worth mentioning here, which he expressed in his library word-shaking booklet entitled Cataloging Rules and Principles, which was published in 1953. His criticism against the codification of cataloging rules that were full of complexities, redundancy, inconsistency, and unnecessary elaboration was widely welcomed. Lubezki indicated a way of establishment of simple and workable code based on well-defined principles recognizing more generalized conditions. The review of his logical genesis of the ALA rules for corporate entry, right from Penny to Cutter to the present, reveals the basic problems relating to the entry under names of place as well as distinctive and common names. Lubezki's recommendations and solutions to the problems are unique and important from practical point of view. A committee was formed and Lubezki was appointed as chairman in 1956, and he published his first draft in 1960 under the title Code of Cataloging Rules, Author and Title Entry. The next catalog code of Indian origin is known as Classified Catalog Code. In short, it is known as CCC. Its first edition came out in 1934 and latest fifth edition came out in 1964. The Classified Catalog Code, first published in 1934, is a unique contribution of Dr. S.R. Ranganathan from India, which can be claimed as a universal code. It is the first code complete in every respect for a classified catalog. The subject approach has been recognized as the dominant one in CCC. The arrangement of cards in the catalog trays follow the order of the classification scheme. It also provides facility for preparing another part of the catalog known as alphabetical part. This part contains alphabetical arrangement by authors, collaborators, series, editor of series, and titles. It gives rules for main entry, class index entry, book index entries, cross-reference index entries, for single volume book, multi-volume book, composite book, periodicals, national bibliographies, union catalog of books and periodicals, indexing and abstracting periodicals. The foundation of the code is based on the normative principles and canons of cataloging which Ranganathan evolved in his book Theory of Library Catalog, which came in 1938. B.S. Keshman remarked that Ranganathan's classified code is logically consequence of a mental approach deeply evolved in classification research. Ranganathan, in his code, to remove the restrictions of the local usage by the concepts of language of the library and the scale of language in which the language of the library comes first and the others come in their descending sequence of favoredness. Now we are coming to the next catalog code known as ACR1. The full title of the catalog code is Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, first 1967. The Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, North American Text, Chicago, ALA 1967, and British text was published by London Library Association in 1967. This code was prepared by the American Library Association, the Library of Congress, the Library Association London, and the Canadian Library Association. It was edited by Samuel Lewitsky from 1956 to 1962, but later on, due to difference of opinion on rules for institution, he resigned and Mr. C. Sumner Spalding completed the work in 1962-65. ACR1 is real science, represents the result of 35 years of activity in the codification of cataloging rules for the British and American libraries. British text is having 216 rules, while American text is having 226 rules. It can be called as multinational code. ACR first is based on the statement of principles adopted by the International Conference on Cataloging Principles in 1961 with certain significant departures. Earlier codes emphasized specific rules for various types of publications and various classes of persons and corporate bodies. The present rules are based on a set of principles followed as consistently as possible, allowing for the necessity of reaching common agreement. ACR 1 includes rules for author, title main entry headings, added entry headings, and references, uniform titles for both title and author entry, description, and all these in relation to any forms, including three-dimensional ones. Though it is meant completely for alphabetical catalog, but it can still be applied without modifications to author title elements of a classified catalog. It is written primarily for large research libraries, but can easily be used for all other types of libraries. According to Taylor and Anderson, ACR first is a complete code in the sense that it covers both choice and form of entry, word, and description of material. It also goes further than previous codes in including rules for a large number of non-book materials like to be found in a large library, for example, manuscripts, maps, films, prints, records, etc. The rules for choice of entry are almost always kept quite distinct from those form of headings, which in turn are clearly distinct from those of description. The form of those examples given with the rules are considerable improved. F. Vernes field reviewed the ACR first American text as ACR will make catalogs easier to understand, to explain, and to use them at present. The cataloging process will be more reasonable because the rules are based on principles that are clearly explained instead of precedents. Next catalog code is ACR 2, which came and was published in 1978. This code was prepared by American Library Association, the British Library, the Canadian Committee on Cataloging, the Library Association, and the Library of Congress, and it was edited by Michael Gorman and Paul W. Winkler. The increasing mechanization in cataloging, the growth of centralized and cooperative bibliographic services and networks, introduction of a number of new media, all these have necessitated to produce a revised catalog code, that is ACR. The main objectives of ACR2 are as follows. First, to reconcile in a single text the North American and British text of 1967. Second, to incorporate in the single text all amendments and changes already agreed and implemented under the previous mechanisms. Third, to consider for inclusion in ACR all proposals for amendment currently under discussion between the ALA, the Library Association, and new proposals put forward by these bodies and the British Library, and proposals of national committees of other countries in which ACR is in use. Fourth one, to provide for international interest in ACR by facilitating its use in countries other than the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Some of the important features of ACR2 are as follows. Amendment of entry under the name of a place of certain institutional bodies. Substitution of uniform titles for form headings. Title headings for marks produced under editorial direction. Provision of standardized framework for the systematic description of all library materials for machine processing. It is based on ISBDs. Hence, AR2 is an attempt towards international catalog code. It has extended its coverage to new categories of library materials, which ACR1 was generally inadequate in its coverage of audiovisual materials. ACR2 is an improvement over ACR1. Provision of 3 levels of description makes it useful for all types of libraries. The next catalog code is known as ACR2R. ACR2R means Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, 2nd edition revised, and this code was revised in 1988 and 2002. Over the years, ACR2 has been updated by occasional amendments and was significantly revised in 1988 and 2002. These revised editions are known as ACR2R, 2nd edition 1988 revision and 2nd edition 2002 revision, respectively. The 2002 revision included substantial changes to sections for non-book materials. Annual update begins in 2003 and ceased with 2005. And the latest code is known as RDA, which came out in 2003. ACR2R has been succeeded by resource description and access, popularly known as RDA, which is developed by the Joint Steering Committee for the Development of RDA with representatives from American Library Association, Australian Committee on Cataloguing, British Library, Canadian Committee on Cataloguing, CLIP, and Library of Congress. It is the new cataloging standard that will replace ACR2R. It provides guidelines on cataloging digital resources and a stronger emphasis on helping users to find, identify, select, and obtain the information they want. It is a flexible and suitable framework for use in a digital environment. RDA has been dealt in detail in Module 33 of this program. So, we have studied the different catalog codes of the world, and students, I hope you might be getting knowledge about the catalog codes of the world which are in existence or which were brought out during the last 2 centuries. Thanking you.